Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to Podcast 142 for March 14th, 2012. We have a great guest today. He is Eric Ries, the author of the book, The Lean Startup. He was previously a guest on episode 115, which you can access by going to leanblog.org/115, or you can find it through iTunes and the other podcast directories. But today we're going to be talking about Eric's reflections on the work of the great Taiichi Ohno, one of the fathers of the Toyota production system. Just 2 weeks back or so would have been the 100th anniversary of his birth. So Eric is joining us as Norman Bodek did in the last podcast, episode 140, to share how Mr. Ohno's work impacted him and helped in his development of the Lean Startup methodology. So as always, I want to thank you for listening. Well, joining us again is Eric Ries, the author of the book, The Lean Startup. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So as we're just past what would have been the 100th birthday of Taiichi Ohno, one of the fathers of the Toyota production system, I wanted to get your thoughts because you cite Mr. Ohno a few times in your book. I'm curious, how did you get introduced to his work and how did it influence you?
Well, it's been incredibly influential. I think I would go so far as to say it has changed my life. And it's actually just a coincidence. You know, it's a funny thing how these things work. To just set you the stage a little bit, I had founded a company called InView in 2004, and I was really into a lot of the ideas that are called agile software development, which have their origins in Lean, but a lot of the works I had read about them, you know, the Toyota was not specifically mentioned, Lean principles were not mentioned, so I didn't know the theory of Lean or anything like that. I knew nothing about manufacturing. I've actually, to be totally honest, never set foot in a manufacturing plant in my whole life. So I have no idea any of that would be relevant to me. Mm-hmm. But I had this intuition that we should be going a lot faster in a startup and doing practices that even in the agile world were considered a little bit extreme. And you know, we've had the chance to talk about them on other occasions, things like continuous deployment, really putting software in customers' hands much faster than was previously considered possible. And I had this problem, which was I had no way to explain to anybody why that was going to work. People would look at me like I was completely crazy. And I could see that it was working because I was very stubborn and I had this intuition. I said, we're going to do it, you know, no matter what. And it was working. But, you know, we always hiring new employees. The company's growing. We're bringing on investors. And we had investors that, when they were doing their due diligence for the company, pulled out because they didn't like the answers I was giving them about how we built the technology. You know, they would bring their experts in, experts trained in more traditional software development methodologies, and they'd just be like, this kid is crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. This is not the way it's done. And we, you know, this was a very stressful, continuous point of stress for me and my co-founders. Okay,
Sure.
So, and you know, you got to remember, you know, at the time, I was by far the youngest person on the team, and I was often younger than the employees I was hiring and training them in this method. So it's not like it was an easy
Right.
situation to be in, but I really believed it was right. And so I was reading everything I could get my hands on for ideas about, first of all, was I actually right or was it a fluke? And if it was right, how could I possibly explain it? And, you know, I had heard, you know, I had read some cases about Toyota, like business school cases, so I was a little bit familiar with it. There was a thing called Toyota Production System, and that's all I knew, and I figured I should be educated about it. So I go on Amazon, I type in Toyota Production System, and lo and behold, this book by Taiichi Ohno comes up called Toyota Production System. I said, perfect. You know, must be the definitive guide
Sure.
to how to set up a Toyota Production System. And I got this book. I'm holding it in my hand right now. Just I found my copy. And, you know, you've read the book. It's
Right.
It is a very wise, very humane philosophical treatise on how to run a business. As a practical manual for setting up a factory or doing any other task, it is not. Sure. It's not exactly your step-by-step guide. And so I remember just having this feeling of, you know, that there's this, like I was reading something crazy. It's kind of like Zen mumbo jumbo about auto-nomination and automation with a human touch and all that stuff. But there's that one passage about the 5 whys in there. And just all of a sudden, for me, for whatever reason, that little section where he talks about trying to get to the root cause of problems by just asking why, and he has a few examples of things I don't even know what they are. A machine with a strainer incorrectly attached. I wouldn't know. I have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah.
Never seen a machine strainer in my whole life, but somehow his very humble, very analytical approach was a lightning bolt to me, and I said, "Oh, I can do that. That's going to solve a huge class of problems that I have in my life, where I'm constantly fighting with people about how much prevention versus, when something goes wrong, do we blame the person? Do we blame the computer? What do we fix that problem? Do we try to solve that whole class of problems?" So that was super helpful, and I that was one of the very first times I learned to see the work that I was doing and the management that I was doing as a system that needed engineering and debugging, just like the software I was used to writing.
So the ideas of the 5 whys being so impactful, and you expand on this in the Lean Startup and everything you're teaching. Did that become a helpful reference point to say to talk about Ohno and Toyota? I mean, how do people in software companies or startups react to, oh, here goes Eric talking about this Toyota guy? Or, I mean,
you got it exactly right. I mean, people were looking at me like I was completely nuts. And to be totally fair, it's not, of course, not just Ohno's book, but a lot of others that were very helpful. And I didn't really, make a lot of progress other than I got some engineers to adopt the 5 whys, but that was as far as I got until I read Lean Thinking and that series of books, and The Machine That Changed the World, and the books that have been specifically written for American managers, breaking it down in a lot more detail and putting the pieces together, not in the Zen style, but in a much more Western analytical style. But even then, a lot of people, they would come to me with a software problem, and I start talking to them about, batch sizes and die stamping and stuff. And of course, you got to remember, my ability to explain what a die stamping machine is very limited because I've never seen one. I don't really understand what it does. And but the funny thing that happened to me was after that, we were able to get really clear wins by changing batch size, by doing 5 whys especially, and by adapting some of these practices. And it was later that I came to really appreciate that I had started with Ohno's book. It almost felt like, and I went back and I read it again and again, and I felt like I had his voice in my head in a lot of situations where my first instinct would be to blame somebody or to, not go investigate something for myself, but just assume that somebody else had it figured out. The idea that your organization has an autonomic nervous system, that it does things, that it needs to be able to do the right thing automatically without people having to expend heroic effort. I don't know, those kinds of ideas, that philosophical approach, it was just there with me all the time. And so, when you reached out to do this, to celebrate his 100th anniversary, I thought, what an awesome opportunity to just reflect on that, just that what the wisdom that he represented.
Yeah, and I know it's something I've learned a great deal from. Sammy Bawry, who is a fantastic dentist in Jacksonville, Florida. He was a similar pioneer to the work you've done, Eric, because he wanted to apply this idea of lean to his dental practice. He didn't have a book to go read about lean in dentistry. And so he went and read the books by Ohno and Shingo and Womack and others, and very much had to kind of synthesize his own approach that would make sense. But it's really fascinating to see where Mr. Ohno's work has touched people in different industries, including yourself.
I mean, I'm just flipping through the book as you're talking to, because I was just remembering. So it's just his simple formula, something like present capacity equals work plus waste. And you're like, well, duh. What else would it be? But no, not duh. If you've never thought to think of the system in that specific way, I don't think there's anything intuitive about it. I don't know anybody who can frame in that as a matter of intuition. But once you have that framing in your mind, you cannot. It's just the testament to what a good idea is. You cannot let it go. You can't see any work. I mean, there was a phase in my family was sick and tired of me because we couldn't go to a restaurant without me being like, wait a minute. They should be using Kanban on the line. That's crazy. What are they doing? You know, grocery store analysis, all this stuff. But just you can't. Nothing. It changes your sense of what is intuitive, what actually naturally makes sense. I'm kind of looking forward to reading this again. I feel like I'm going to go back and see what other wisdom I haven't yet come to understand.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely fun to go back and revisit. And you know, I would love to help fix that problem where you've never visited a factory, Eric. Maybe we can line something up. We're going to find a sponsor in your neighborhood, or if you're back in Texas, let's go down to the Toyota San Antonio plant and.
I'd love to do that sometime.
Give you some context for what you've read, and hopefully you'll be rereading. So,
love to do that.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you. Thanks a lot, Eric, for sharing some of your recollections and thoughts here as we celebrate what Mr. Ohno brought to the world and to what we would call the lean, or now through your work and others, the lean startup methodology. So thanks for taking time to talk about that today.
No, I appreciate it. It's you know, I feel honored to even be in the same kind of chain of thinking as him, and just thank you for your leadership on this issue, and thanks for your support.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.